So what you want to know now?
Well, I want to know what your struggle was as a young black man in America in the 1940s. You're trying to serve your country. I want to know what the obstacles were for you and your squad.
Well, the obstacles that we had, let's see. Now, what I would like to do, I would tell you that that the Tuskegee Airmen proved to the world that if a Negro was given the opportunity with a good education, hard work, and a little luck, we could do the job as well as anyone else. We had myths and many obstacles to overcome, and overcome them we did.
What type of myths did you have?
We'll tell you.
Okay. You ready? Yeah,
I'm good. Hey, go.
We can repeat it. The myths. One of the myths we had, our brain was supposed to be 25% smaller than anybody else's.
I heard that. And whose bright idea was that? Was this a doctor that said this? I mean, where did this come from?
It was a senator, a U.S. senator, said that to his comrades in the House of Congress, that our brain, he was told by his psychiatrist, a doctor, that our brain was 25% smaller. And our brain being 25% smaller, how do we expect to do what the white man could do?
Must have been a Republican.
I don't know. It could have been a Democrat. It could have been anyone.
Sounds like a Republican.
It told me, but I don't recall whether he was a Republican or a Democrat. I don't know which one. But that was the theory going around.
How were you treated?
Huh?
How were you treated in the military?
How was I treated?
Yeah, how was your squad treated? How were you, the guys, how were you guys treated?
Well, the story would be that when I got my navigator wings, we were told that the Negroes, we were Negroes back in those days.
I remember.
All right, now.
Yes, when I was a little girl, we were Negroes.
We were Negroes.
Yes.
We were told that the planes that the pilots were flying up at Godman Field were medium bombers. And the medium bombers required that the navigator be a bombardier. And that we were being sent to Midland Army Air Base to train to be bombardiers. Unfortunately for me and my classmates, we were the first Negro officers to set foot on Midland Army Air Base. Right after we arrived at Midland Army Air Base and gotten off the train, a white officer came up to us and told us that he was Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, that he, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, was the Deputy Commander of Midland Army Air Base, and that he, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, he was born in Texas, he was raised in Texas, and he expected to die in Texas. And if we Negroes didn't know our place while we were in his state of Texas, he spelled it out for us. 1, we could not eat in the officers' mess. 2, we could not go in the officers' club. 3, if we go to the theater, we couldn't sit in the officers' section. And 4, if we go to town, we had to ride the back of the bus.
What year was this?
1944.
Captain, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this interview.
Go.
I'm good. Okay. Oh, are we?
Yeah, I'm rolling. So you
okay.
can add, you can chop this up.
Oh, okay. Lovely. All right. So how did you guys feel about that? I mean, you were. Okay. I have a question for you. Before you got to that Air Force base, you were already an officer.
Yeah, we had earned our navigator wings.
Okay. All right. Now, where did you guys become officers at? Where were you when you became officers?
Hondo, Texas.
In Texas. Okay.
Hondo, Texas.
And then once you became an officer, they sent you to this Air Force base.
Well, let's put it this way. When we went in the service, and if you want background, all of the background, when President Roosevelt ordered the Army to start training Negroes to become pilots, over 15,000 of us took and passed the exam. Of the 15,000 of us that took and passed the exam, they only took 10% of us. Now, before the 10% was chosen, we had to take another test. It was called a 2-part test. It was called a psychoanalysis test was the first part. It was a multiple choice test, and it lasted 8 hours. The second test was not so bad. It was called a psychomatic test. It only lasts 4 hours.
Now, do you believe that's the same test that they gave the white officers?
I do not know. I believe there may be and maybe not. I don't know. We never checked to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But from reading in my book here, I think they may have given some of the white officers that. But you must realize it was not the test, it was how many they took from the test. They only took 10% of Negroes. Now they might have taken 30 or 40, 50% of the whites. So we don't know, because it could have been the same test, but not the same amount taken.
Not the same ratio.
It's the same ratio, and that was it there. Because of the 10% of us that was finally chosen, roughly about 70% of us made it all the way through. Now, when you came down to the red tails, you say you saw it. As I said before,
Yes.
what you saw is what they did and accomplished once they were allowed in combat. They did not tell you anything what took place before or after. I can assure you, when those Negro pilots who did an outstanding job and you came back home, they found out that quickly that the racism they left when they went there was waiting for them when they came back home.
So
Now,
you guys didn't get a welcome arms, good job,
well, when the
we love
Negro
you.
pilots came back on a boat, they were all together. When they landed in America, this gate was for whites, that gate was for blacks. And that's when they knew that when they came back, everything that they left was the same when they came back.
I have a question for you, Daniel.
Sure.
Were any of the officers that were part of the Tuskegee Airmen, did they stay in Europe and say, we don't want the racism that's in America, we'd like to stay?
Well, no.
They all
Well,
came home.
They had to come home. They didn't want to come back. When the war ended, troops from Europe were brought back, and they were going to be sent to the Pacific Coast, the Pacific Theater. But as you know, because when the war ended, the commanding officer, the reason why there were no twin-engine pilots in the war zone, because the commanding officer at Godman Field was a racist, and his immediate boss was a racist. And by them being racist, his argument was that the Negroes could fly the bombers with no problem at all. But mentally, he figured they couldn't stand up under combat. And that's the reason why he strongly recommended that they do not be sent overseas. But when the war ended in Europe, the Army replaced the commanding officer at Godman Field with B.O. Davis. And the first thing B.O. Davis did was to make sure that the bomber group was going to be sent overseas. And they were scheduled to go overseas in September. But as you know, the atomic bomb ended the war in August. So that meant they never went overseas. Now, there's one thing I'd like for you all to remember.
Okay.
What were the Tuskegee Airmen, your opinion?
What were they?
Yeah.
I thought they were heroes.
No, but I mean, well, their status. What I'm trying to get at, the Tuskegee Airmen were more than pilots.
You were
Most
officers.
of you all think that Tuskegee men were just pilots, but they weren't all pilots. There were navigators, there were bombardiers, there were doctors, there were nurses, there were mechanics, there were ground crew, field personnel, instructors. All of those people were Tuskegee Airmen. At its peak, there was over 14,000 of us, men and women, who were called Tuskegee Airmen. Now, out of that 14,000 plus, only 900 plus were pilots. 200, they were single rated. 250 were navigators and bombardiers. They were dual rated. And only 3 of us were navigator, bombardier, and pilot, triple rated. I was one of the 3 that was triple rated.
You were one of the triple rated.
I was navigator, bombardier, and pilot. So I'd like the people to remember that the pilots weren't the only Tuskegee Airmen.
Okay. And that's what Red Tails, from what I understand, that was supposed to have sequels. And during the sequels, they were going to explain that and add in the women and what their part was and all the surrounding cast that all helped to get you guys where you were.
That's right,
keep
because
you in
without
the
the
air.
background, we wouldn't exist. My best friend in the pilot was the mechanic. Now, if he fouled, we were dead if he messed up that plane. So, hey, that was my best friend. We didn't mind giving him a fifth of whiskey any time for the good service that he did for us. Don't you kidding?
No, that's excellent. And they showed a little bit of that in Red Tails.
Our life kind of depended upon, of course, the way we handled ourselves was also, but if the plane wasn't working properly, that was it. So getting back to me, when I got my navigator wings, I said, when we walked into Midland Army Air Base, the first thing the fellow told Lieutenant Curtis, he was born, raised, respected in Texas, and that we couldn't eat these places. So when we went to eat our noonday meal, the first day we got there, we were told to go to the cadet mess hall at 12 o'clock. So we arrived at cadet mess hall at 12 o'clock to eat our noonday meal. Now, back in my days, meals were called breakfast, dinner, and supper.
Mm-hmm. My grandmother called it that.
All right.
Yes.
So at 12 o'clock sharp, we arrived at the cadet mess hall to eat our noonday meal. 12:05, 12:10, 12:15, 12:10, no food. But we noticed that every time a group of white cadets came and sat down, they were promptly fed. After the last group had came in and been fed, the mess sergeant stopped bringing us what was left of the food. By this time, we were so angry that we told the mess sergeant and his crew to take the food they were bringing us and shove it. Walked over to the Army officers' mess hall and demanded that we be fed. The next morning, well, when we arrived at the, you want the whole story?
I want to know what happened when you got over there and demanded to be fed in 1940. What 1940 are we talking?
This was 1944.
1944.
1940.
20 years old, an officer, and
Yes,
you went
sir.
over and demanded to be fed in the officers' mess hall when you were told that.
In short, I'll tell you the truth, the German officers who were prisoners here were treated better than we were.
I've heard
They
that.
could go places on the base that we couldn't go.
That's ridiculous.
But they're a prisoner of war.
Yes.
There's no difference. They were white.
Wow.
They were white. There ain't no difference. These are the officers I'm talking about. They were white. They'd go places we couldn't go on the base. That was it there. So, right after, when we went in the officers' mess club, of course, when we walked in the officers' club mess door, the people in there were shocked. For the simple reason, until we walked in the door, they didn't know any black officers were on the base, because this happened all on the first day. But the mess sergeant, who was a Negro, quickly recovered, and the first question he asked us why we were so late coming for our noonday meal. We told him what happened. He told us he was sorry to hear that, but he thought he just finished serving the last officer, and he's getting ready to close up shop, but he would do what he could for us while we were there. But he promised us that when we came in for supper that night and all our other meals, we were treated just like any other officer walking on that base. We told him thank you, that's all we wanted to hear. So we went in for supper that night, no problem. Breakfast the next morning, no problem. Right after breakfast the next morning, Phelps and his crew came over demanding why we had disobeyed his order by not eating the cadet mess hall. We told the lieutenant colonel what had taken place, and he told us that excuse wasn't good enough for him. And for disobeying his order, he's going to have each and one of us court-martialed. Well, right after Phelps left, one of my classmates who had served a year at the Pentagon before becoming a navigator said to us, if we're going to be court-martialed, why be court-martialed by a lieutenant colonel? Let's be court-martialed by a general. And of course, the first thing we said,
Why not?
What difference does it make a court-martial being a court-martial? And the answer was, it just looked better on our record saying we were court-martialed by a general than a lieutenant colonel. So we asked him to write us a letter. So a couple of hours later, the letter was brought over to my quarters. And after reading the letter, I asked him, had my other classmates seen it? I was told yes. Then I asked him, did they approve the letter? The answer was yes. Then I asked him if they read and approved the letter, why aren't there any signatures on the letter? The answer was, although each one of my classmates read it, no one wanted to be the first to sign it because they figured he who signed it first, Phelps would consider him to be the ringleader. So I said, I guess momentarily I would have to be the ringleader. But I was the first one to sign the letter.
Wow.
And most of my classmates, and all of them, co-signed the letter. Later that afternoon, we sent the letter to the Southwestern Commanding General and placed a copy of it on the base commander's desk. A few days later, a group of white officers came over to our quarters and told us that the general was on the base and ordered every white officer to meet with him in the base theater to discuss our situation. That's where they were going, and after the meeting was over, they would come and give us a report. About an hour or so later, they came back and gave us a report. After all the white officers had assembled in the theater, the general threw out the question, how should we Negroes be treated? And we were told that the discussion in the theater became so heated that a fist fight broke out amongst some of the white officers in the base theater. And the only way the general was able to quell the melee was by having the national anthem played.
Oh my goodness.
After everything was restored back in order, the general told the officers in the theater that although we were Negroes, we were officers in the United States Army Air Force, and being officers in the United States Air Force, we will be treated with the same respect and dignity of any other officer on the base, period.
Amen.
We walked off the podium, followed by the base commander. And as soon as the doors closed on the two men, Phelps told the officers before dismissing them that he would get even at those Negroes as the last thing he ever did.
Yikes.
2 weeks later, the temperature was running around 100 degrees in the shade. Phelps ordered our quarters and our quarters only to have a gas mask drill. A gas mask drill back in those days was one you had to wear a full-face gas mask for 4 hours. And to make sure we got the full, to make sure we got everything out of it, I guess you would say, he ordered us to wear it between 1 and 5, the hottest part of the day, confined to our barracks.
In Texas.
So it so happened that my quarters were the last one in the barracks. So being the last one in the barracks, we had 2 exposed walls. With 2 exposed walls, we had 2 windows. So hopefully, if a breeze came up, it would come through one window and go out the other. So we invited 4 of our closest classmates to spend a miserable afternoon with us in our quarters. After they arrived, I locked the door. About 2.5 hours later, we heard doors being opening and closed. Now we knew it could only be Phelps and his crew checking up on us to see how miserable we were. Of course, when he got to my door, he couldn't open it because it was locked. I heard a knock on the door and I asked, who is it? No answer. Then I heard another knock on the door and I asked a little louder, who is it? No answer. The third time he knocked on my door, one of my classmates said, damn it to hell, if you can't tell us who you are, I suggest, using the good word, that you urinate on the floor, slide under the door on your urine, and please, while doing so, sing the Negro National Anthem. Then I heard a voice said, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps. I opened up the door and looked in the face of a red-faced colonel and said, sorry, sir, I didn't know it was you. I thought it was one of my classmates playing a trick on us. And the colonel said, well, I see you 6 men are not wearing your gas mask at order. We'll have each and every one of you court-martialed. One of my classmates said, Lieutenant Colonel, sir, the Army regulations state that the drill you're putting us through now shall be carried out once every 6 months. Now, if you check our records, you'll see just before we left Hondo, we had this drill. So we don't have to have it again. So that stopped ordering us from having that drill.
Wow.
2 weeks before graduation, a group of white officers came over our quarters and told us Phelps was doing everything in his power to have us sent to some godforsaken island in the Pacific. But as far as they were concerned, he was wasting his time. For the simple reason, 1, there were no black pilots in the Pacific. And 2, there was no way in hell that the Army going to let a black navigator tell a white pilot where to go during the war. So that stopped that. 2 weeks later, we were at Godman Field where the Negro pilots were in transitional training. Now, the reason why there were, as I said before, the reason why there were no Negro pilots, twin-engine pilots in the war zone, because the commanding officers are racist and his immediate bosses are racist. Now, the reason why we think we made it through Midland Army Air Base without any casualties, because Midland Army Air Base was not only a training center, it was an R&R base for return combat bombardiers. And those combat bombardiers, knowing what the Red Tails had did for them while they were in combat, and were still doing for their friends who were still in combat, Phelps wasn't able to bribe them, intimidate them, or coerce them in any way to have some of us thrown out of pilot training, bombardiering training. Right after we arrived at Godman Field, the Army brass realized they didn't have enough pilots to accommodate all us navigators. So I guess not knowing what to do with us, they sent us back to pilot training. Well, when we arrived back to pilot training, it was close to 30 of us in my group. 6 months later, when we graduated, there were only 3 of us left.
What happened?
Phelps had gotten rid of the other 20 members.
Give me one of the ways that he got rid of one of your comrades.
So the second week when we arrived at the base at Tuskegee Army Base, when we walked into our AINI class, we saw, that means Naval and Aviation Identification. Up on the blackboard there were 10 X's. When our instructor came in, who was a Negro and a civilian, said, "Good morning." He said, "You see those 10 X's on the board?" He said, "Yes. Come Friday, 10 of you men will not be in this class." Momentarily, we were stunned by his remark. And then we said almost in unison, "Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, that rascal tentacles had followed us all the way over to Tuskegee Army Air Base. Come Friday, true to his words, 10 of us were thrown out of pilot training. I topped to this. Now the reason why we knew it was Phelps, for the simple reason the 10 of us that was thrown out just happened to be the 10 first signatures on the letter we sent the Southwestern Commanding General when he tried to have us court-martialed the first time. And wherein I was the first one to sign it, I was the first one thrown out."
Oh, they did throw you out?
Oh, sure.
For what reason?
To be honest with you, until the day, I have not been able to figure out what Phelps could offer a black civilian instructor to have so many of us thrown out of pilot training.
Where is Phelps now?
Well, let's face it, Phelps was in his 40s or 50s now.
Yeah, he was in his 20s. Yeah. Oh.
I don't know which way. I don't know whether he's up or down.
Longitude or latitude.
But so what we did, we wrote a letter to the Southeastern Commanding General. A few days later, the general was on the base. He met with a delegation from my class, and after the meeting was over, the 10 of us that was thrown out of pilot training were placed back in the program, and the instructor was fired. Now, while this was going on, much to my surprise, 1/3 of my classmates were told they couldn't solo the plane in the quiet number of hours, and were promptly sent back to Godman Field. At the end of lower primary, half the men in my group had been thrown out of pilot training. When we reached upper primary, 2/3 of the men in my class had been thrown out of pilot training. We strongly believe Phelps had a hand in getting rid of most of our men.
Did they ever, like, for instance, when they would get rid of somebody, did they say, "We're getting rid of you because of this," or did they just say, "Okay, you're off the squad"?
No, they say you didn't pass the test. That's all.
Okay.
When you went out flying, I didn't like the way you were flying. As a matter of fact, not in my group, but in the group that was beside my group, one the cadets was already a lieutenant. He came down on the flight line one morning, and the instructor looked at him and said, "I don't like your mustache. When you come here tomorrow morning, that mustache better be removed." Naturally, he being a second lieutenant, when he came back the next morning, the mustache was still on. After his check ride, he was no longer a trainee.
See, that's just ridiculous. That is just like ridiculous stuff. Okay, I have a question. Did you were a fighter pilot, correct?
No, I was a bomber pilot.
A bomber pilot. Okay.
When I finished primary training, just before we entered basic flight training, we were told 2 things. One, all training done in basic and advanced was done by Army personnel, and quite a few of them weren't quite friendly.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, we had one instructor there who was proud of his record of never ever passing anyone from basic to advanced or advanced to graduation. So we knew whoever got him as instructor wasn't going to make it. And wherein each instructor was given 3 men to train in advanced and 3 men to train in basic, 6 men in every class going through, as long as he was an instructor, wasn't going to make it. The second thing we were told, that the planes that everyone had trained in basic training before us weren't going to be used anymore. The planes that we would have to learn how to fly in basic were the planes that everyone before us had learned how to fly in advance. Now, just before we entered advanced basic flight training, the Army brass made a Negro 99th captain and instructor. And I and two of my classmates were his first pupil. At the end of basic flight training, I know you all guessed it, we were the only three left. Phelps had gotten rid of all the rest of them. Just before we entered advanced flight training, the flight game had changed one more time. The planes that single engine had learned how to, the single engine plane were going to be changed. They weren't, let's put it this way, the flight game had changed in that the planes that the other pilots had learned how to fly were no longer going to be used. The planes that we would have to learn how to fly in advance were single engines would have to learn how to fly the P-40 fighter planes. And single engine and twin engine students had to learn how to fly the B-25s. Now, when we went down on the flight line, we saw several B-25s ready for twin engine students training. But there was no P-40s on the flight line. That meant that the single engine students would continue flying the same planes they flew in basic. It also meant the single engine student would have the same instructors in advance that they had in basic, wherein the twin engine instructors had taught the student how to fly the AT-10 did not qualify to teach the student how to fly the B-25s. That meant outside instructors had to be brought in. Right after we finished basic flight training, my instructor told Lindsay and Williams, the two of us left in my group, that Lindsay was going to be trained to be twin engine pilots. I was going to be trained to be a fighter pilot. As soon as he finished telling me I was going to be a fighter pilot, I knew, under the present conditions and circumstances, my chances of earning my pilot wings ran anywhere between slim to none, with Phelps after me. I told my instructor that, and he told me he did not make the assignments, he just carried them out. And I told him that was all right, but I would appreciate it very much if he'd have me transferred from single engine to twin engine.
Did he do that?
A couple hours later, he came back and told me my wish had been granted. And to make sure there was no hanky-panky going on in advanced flight training, he made sure that all three of us got the same instructor. And he made sure that the instructor we got was not a racist. 2.5 weeks before graduation, all I had to do to earn my pilot wings and get a promotion was to pass my instrument flight check and my AI/NI test.
And you did?
The day before I took my instrument flight check, I developed a wicked cold. My throat was so raw, I couldn't hardly swallow. A couple of my former classmates who were still on the base because of a mutiny going on.
I was going to ask you about the mutiny. I had not forgotten. I want to hear about the mutiny. Yes,
going
sir.
up at Freeman Field suggested to me the quickest way to get rid of that sore throat was to take a good shot of Alabama moonshine. I took a good shot of Alabama moonshine.
Who had Alabama
White
moonshine?
lightning.
Who had it? Who had it available? Because you guys were in what state at this point?
Alabama.
You were in, oh, okay.
Tuskegee.
Okay, okay, so we left Texas, we're in Tuskegee,
Right.
okay.
I took a good
So it
shot
was
of
definitely
Alabama
available.
moonshine and spent the next 7 days in the hospital.
Yikes.
After talking my way out of the hospital on a Wednesday, week and a half before graduation, I went up to my instructor and told him I was ready to take my flight check. He told me, sorry, all flight checks for my class had been completed.
Even though you were in the hospital?
No, I got out of the hospital. After I spent 7 days in the hospital. And after spending 7 days, I managed to talk my way out after 1 week in the hospital. And that when I talked my way out, it was on a Wednesday, a week and a half before graduation. That's when I went up to my instructor and told him I was ready to take my instrument flight check. And he told me, sorry, all flight checks from my class had been completed, and I'd have to wait till the next class came along to take my flight check. I told him I didn't want to wait till the next class came along. I wanted to take it now. and I gave him my reason for wanting to do so. Friday afternoon, my instructor came up to me and told me, Dan, you know, Saturdays and Sundays are my day off. I said, yes, sir, I know that. I tell you what he said. The football team here in the base is going to play the Marines down in North Carolina this coming Sunday. Now, if you will fly the team equipment down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, tomorrow morning, he said, I'll fly down with you as your co-pilot. And on the way back, I'll give you your flight check. I flew a perfect mission down and a perfect mission back. As soon as I landed the plane, I went over to the administration building to check on my records. My flight record didn't say satisfactory, it said very satisfactory. My academic record wasn't what I thought it should have been, but a 92 was 7 points higher than an 85 white squawk. In order to get a promotion, my academic record had to be above an 85. I went over and told my former classmates, one or two of them were still on the base, the good news. And one of them said, not so fast. I said, what's going on now? Well, he said, there's a rumor going around that if Robinette, who was the second Negro lieutenant, failed you in AINI, he would be promoted to a first lieutenant. Phelps is still after you. Monday morning after we took the test,
oh my gosh,
my
are you
two
serious?
classmates compared notes, and they came to the conclusion, if I fail, they fail. We all had the same answers. Tuesday when we went in to get our test scores, my two classmates got their papers first, and they marked were somewhere between 96 and 100. I knew then I defeated Phelps one more time. After all the papers were passed out, I looked up at Robinette and asked him, where was my test paper? He said, somewhere or another he lost my test paper, and by losing my test paper, I'd have to take a makeup test. And if I passed the makeup test, the highest mark I could get would be a 70. Now, I will not repeat to you what I said to Robinette.
Oh my goodness.
The AINI test marks were the lowest of all our academic mark value. So factoring the 70 into the 92, I came up with an 89. Friday afternoon before Monday's graduation, I was told to report to the administration building to sign my records. When I was given my flight record, it said very satisfactory. I signed it. When I was given my academic record, the sheet was blank. I looked at the man behind the desk. I said, this cotton picking form is blank. You don't expect me to sign it, do you? Man said, you want your wings this coming Monday morning? Sure, I said. Then you better sign it, because if you don't sign this piece of paper, you will not get your wings this coming Monday morning. I signed the blank form. Monday morning, when I got my wings, I was denied my promotion.
I was going to say, you wouldn't get your promotion, though.
So, wait, the wings were more important to me than the promotion. Getting the wings was the more important. 2 weeks later, Robinette was given his first lieutenant bars.
So he got the promotion for failing you.
And two things I really learned when I was in the Army. One, not all white people were racist. And two, not all black people had our best interests at heart.
That is so sad. My gosh, that's crazy. Now, when you went overseas,
No,
where
it
were
didn't
you?
go overseas.
You never went overseas?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer your questions, though.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask where you were a fighter, a bomber pilot, correct? Mm-hmm. So did you actually see action? I mean, were you? No?
I didn't see it. But my friends, a couple of my friends, we were Boy Scouts together back in Boston, Massachusetts. They were in the Red Tails.
Is that where you're from, Boston?
Yeah. I was born in New York.
Okay.
But my parents moved to Boston when I was 1 year old, so I spent most of all my life, might as well all my childhood and adult life in Massachusetts.
How old were you when you enlisted?
21.
You were 21 when you enlisted. So how old were you when you became an officer?
22.
So it only took you 1 year to make it to officer.
That's all.
That's excellent.
Because when I was drafted, I was drafted in September of '43. Mm-hmm. When I got to the draft board, that man tried his best to put me in the Navy, but by my having taken the test before I was drafted, made it possible for me to go in the Air Force instead of the Navy. And the first thing they sent us to Biloxi, Mississippi, Keesler Field. That's where we spent 2 months of basic training.
Okay, so you were a northerner. So how did it feel to go into the South in the middle of the 40s?
No problem at all.
Really?
I'll tell you why. When I was 5 years old, my father sent me and my brother to live with his sister in South Carolina for 1 year.
Okay. All right.
That
So you had a
1
little
year
taste of the
lasted
South.
5 years. So I can assure you, I knew all about the South. I took my 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade in the South.
In South Carolina?
South Carolina,
Oh,
right
boy.
where the atomic energy plants now. My uncle owned 150 acres of land, which they took away by eminent domain.
Eminent domain, but they paid him if it was eminent
Oh,
domain,
well,
correct?
they paid him.
But did they pay him, like,
Who knows?
would have been, okay. I wanted to know, was it like, they're supposed
Savannah
to pay
River.
market value.
That's near
Savannah River.
Savannah
Yeah,
River. I know where that's
Savannah.
my ex-wife's people's from that neck of the woods.
Okay.
Schools back in those years for Negroes, the master, was 6 and 6. 6 months long and only went as far as the 6th grade.
Really? You only got a 6th grade education in the South.
That's right.
But in the North, you could go to school all the way up to college,
Because
correct?
when I finished my 6th grade, I was fortunate. One of my father's sisters came down, and when he found out I couldn't go any further in the South, she raised holy hell, and 2 months later, my brother and I were back up north.
That's good.
So we finished, but I had to repeat the 6th grade. Because
Okay.
the 6th grade school in the South was only 6 months long. School up north was 9 months.
Oh, okay. So
And
yes,
they
you were
didn't
missing.
recognize a 6-month school, so that means we had to repeat it.
Tell me about the mutiny. I would love to hear about the mutiny. We talked about that a little earlier.
Oh, well, let's see. Godman Field, when pilots earned their pilot wings, they were all sent to a field called a transitional field. It was a small Army base where we went and familiarized ourselves with the planes we were going to fly overseas. The base that Negroes went to was Godman Field. All right? Godman Field is the place where the Negroes went. The pilots kept going into Godman Field, but account of the racist attitude of the commanding officer, no one ever left. So you had people coming in, no one going out. When in the white bases, you came in, spent a month or two, and you went. So eventually, Godman Field became overcrowded. So what they did, they transferred them to a larger base. That was Freeman Field in Indiana. The day after they arrived at Indiana, the officers, being officers, went in the officers' club. Of course, when they went in the officers' club, they were arrested. And of course,
The black officers were
the black
arrested?
officers, that's right.
Okay.
Believe it or not, white German officers could go in the officers' club, the prisoners, but we couldn't.
I was just going to say, a white prisoner of war, a POW,
That's right.
A German.
that was German,
Officer, yeah.
German, that
Had more-
Hitler, that they're taking over all of Europe, they're enslaving Jews and putting them in concentration camps, and they get to America, and they have the privilege that black officers did not have.
We didn't have.
That's interesting.
That's it. So over 100 of them was arrested and placed.
100 black officers were arrested for walking into an officers'
That's
club.
right. Or trying to
Did
walk
they
in the
know?
officers' club. Huh?
Was
Did
there a
they know
sign
they
up
weren't
that said
supposed to
no
be
black
there?
officers
Well, they had
here?
a provost marshal standing by the door telling you.
A
But they
marshal
went
telling
in
you you
anyhow,
could not
some
go
of
in.
them. That's right. The two or three of them that went by and brushed up against the officers, they said they attacked him, and they were court-martialed and fined only a small fine of $25 for 3 months. The reason why I say a small fine, because when I was going through primary training, my roommate, who was from Boston also, he was only 18. He was as smart as a whip, but he was cocky, and he was a little arrogant. So during primary training, he was caught doing some maneuvers with the plane that he shouldn't have been doing.
That's kind of in Red Tails. They do where the guys
That's
jump
right.
in the plane
That's
and do
right,
things
doing
they're not.
that.
Okay.
And he got caught. And we told him when he landed the plane that he was spotted doing maneuvers that he shouldn't be doing. And after each flight, we had to sign a paper saying we had done everything according to Hoyle. And we told him, don't sign that paper because you got caught. but being cocky and arrogant, he signed it anyhow.
Oh.
And by signing that paper, Phelps saw to it that he was not only court-martialed, but he was fined $100 a month for 1 year. When these other, and imagine $100 a month back in the 40s.
Oh my gosh, or 44?
That's right.
That's a king's ransom.
That's
back
right.
then.
But when Davis took over Garden Field, he had it reduced to 6 months. But the reason why I say that, the fellows in the mutiny only got court-martialed and fined $25 for 3 months, where my classmate who got caught illegal flying was fined $100 a month for a year.
Okay, so the mutiny was that you guys walked into the officers club anyway.
I tried
You took
to.
the court-martial and the $25 a month fine.
Well, 3 of them were court-martialed. The other 90 were given a letter of reprimand placed in their file. 25 years later, the court-martial was rescinded,
Nice.
and the fines of $25 fines were given back to them with interest.
Very
And
nice.
the ones
Oh,
with
my.
letter of reprimand put in the file, that was removed. I think we had assistant secretary, that's in the book I have, who was black, saw to it that took place.
Okay. Now, Daniel, I saw, like, I love history,
ahead.
so I saw Red Tails, and I saw Tuskegee Airmen, the movie that had Malcolm Jamal Warner, and that's the only one I can remember now, but that one came out maybe in the 90s.
Wasn't Don Cheadle, was it?
95.
No, it wasn't Don Cheadle. I'm not a Don Cheadle fan. Look, he goes 95. Okay, so yes. Now, I loved that movie, Tuskegee
That was
Airmen, the
Fitchburg.
1995 one. Yes. I saw Red Tails, and I liked it. I loved the fight scenes were excellent, but I thought the storyline was a lot weaker than the storyline in 1995. Now, I measure war movies by if I cry, it's a good movie. Now, I boo-hooed my eyes out on Tuskegee Airmen in 1995, but the one I just saw, the Red Tails one, it was good, but it didn't grab me. Now, between those two movies, you actually lived what we're watching. Did it in any way give an account accurate of what you went through?
Oh, now wait a minute.
And if so, which one out of the two do you feel?
The first one, the one in 95, suspect more of what went on than the Red Tails. The Red Tails didn't tell you anything that took place beforehand. As I said before, and didn't tell you anything afterwards.
Right.
They only tell you what they did when they were overseas.
It stuck us in the middle. I pretty much got a middle part out of that.
Yeah, and
I
you
didn't
know
get
what
no
the-
beginning and no end.
What I understand is there was supposed to be a trilogy. It was supposed to be like that one, Red Tails, and if it got good support, they were going to come back and put money in and do a sequel, a prequel. The prequel would have been what happened before everybody got overseas. It was
And
supposed to be a
maybe what-
prequel and a sequel.
And what happened after they came back.
Yes. Now, yes, exactly. So, do you think then that it just really didn't kind of grab your story?
Well, they grabbed this. It all depends on how you want to look at it.
Okay.
The story, because a lot of people who don't know too much about the Tuskegee Airmen, as far as they were concerned, the Red Tail was it. They never dawned upon them what happened beforehand, and naturally it didn't dawn upon them what happened afterwards. Because although President Truman ordered the armed forces desegregated in 1948, it didn't really take place until 1965. And
Who
it
was the
took-
president in '65?
Wait,
Who came after President
Johnson,
Kennedy?
Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon B. Johnson? Okay.
Because
All
my
right.
mom was in '63
Well, when
she
was
had to
Nixon
get out.
president?
because she had me. Because back then you couldn't be
A mother?
a mother and in the military. And then in '69 they started a program where her and another lady were the first two to go in, and she retired.
Okay, so it was Kennedy. Then when you came out, then it was Johnson. So not came out, but during the time frame that you're talking about was because you said Truman was the president.
Truman was
when they desegregated it.
That's right, in 1948.
But not until the '60s, you said that it actually
Well,
happened.
it took 4 days of intense rioting at Travis Air Force Base to really start bringing it about.
Talk to me about the rioting. What year was that?
1965.
Oh, okay.
Travis Air Force Base. That's outside of.
That's in California.
Yes, in California.
Okay.
So they had to riot in California.
That's right. It took 4 days. It took outside cops and everybody to quell it. it took so long.
I'm a Cali girl. I understand the writing.
And,
But that's a good cause if that's what got them to open up their
that's
eyes
right.
and
'Cause
see.
up and from between 1948 and 1965, it was almost business as usual as far as Negroes was concerned.
So you could go and fight for your country and do everything, become an officer, and then when you got back into society, you were still just
A Negro.
that could not use that, well, because it was Jim Crow law. It was Jim Crow law, so you couldn't go to this washroom and you
That's
couldn't
right.
use this sink and you
That's
couldn't
right.
eat at this lunch counter. And all of that happened up until the 60s.
That's
So
right.
you walked out of being an officer in the military and fighting for your country to get back, and you can't go into that washroom.
Didn't
You
need
could
a
not
thing.
be served at this
The
lunch
part
counter.
that I think the Negroes, we played, the Tuskegee men played with the civil rights movement. It proved, white folks couldn't say that we gave you an opportunity in the 40s. You were educated and you failed. By us not failing, they couldn't say that. So the civil rights movement could say, you gave us an opportunities in the 40s, and what happened? We excelled.
Nice.
So what make you think that if we did it back in the 40s, we could do it now? Now, if we had failed, I can assure you the civil rights movement would have had a rougher time, because the first thing they would have said, we gave you educated Negroes a chance to prove yourself during World War II, and what happened? You fell flat on your face. So what make you think you can do any better now than they did back then? But when we didn't fail, they could never use that argument. Our argument was, give us an opportunity, and with a good education, we can do the job as well as anybody else. You'd be surprised when I was at Keeser Field, Mississippi, the number of GIs, Negro GIs, what they had sitting out in the field trying to learn how to read and write. We had soldiers in the Army and Negroes, so they couldn't even read or write.
So was it a safe haven for black people back in the 40s to go into the military? Was that a way out of the fields and out of what you were going through in society?
No safe. Back then, you were drafted.
Oh, that's right. There was a draft.
There was a draft.
So there was a draft. Was there a draft for World War II? Because I thought everybody just enlisted. You know, after Pearl
Enlisted
Harbor.
was not until the war ended.
Oh, okay.
During World War II. Now, the reason why I went in the Air Force, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if they're patriots or not, but the reason why I went in the Air Force, back in the 30s and 40s, when one went to the movies, the first thing you saw was a cartoon. The second thing you saw was Lowell Thomas and the news. The third thing you saw was the coming attractions. And the fourth thing you saw were the movies. Back in the 20s, 30s, and early 40s, when we went to the movies, you always saw two movies, not one,
Yes.
but two. Now this day when I was at the movies, Lowell Thomas' clip was on what were the armed services doing during the war. It showed the Marines storming the beach, and I said to myself, that's a quick way to get yourself killed. It showed the Navy bombarding the beachhead just as they were landing. Now that didn't approve to me either, for the simple reason the water made me seasick. Then it showed the GIs in the trenches eating GI food, sea rationing. You know I didn't like that. Then it showed the Air Force, the men walking around the camp with clean uniforms on. They had a clean bed to sleep in every night. They had 3 square meals to eat every day. And if you were flying officer, you got 50% more pay. I said to myself, if I'm ever drafted in the armed services, that's where I'm going. And that's why I went in the Air Force. Because I had a clean uniform every day, I had a bed to sleep in every night, I had 3 square meals to eat each day, and I got 50% more pay.
Well, we thank you for your service, because what you did, Daniel, was pave the way for where African Americans are today. So we totally thank you for your struggle and what you went through.
It wasn't easy. Because the first thing I did when I got out of the service, though, was to get my commercial pilot license. That's the first thing I did.
What did you do after the military?
Well, before I went in the military, I was studying aeronautical engineering at Northeastern University.
You were 20? Yes, you were 20. So you had 2 years of college by the
That's
time.
right.
Okay.
And I was studying, but when I got out the service, I realized that aviation didn't hold much of a future for Negroes. So I switched my major from aeronautical engineering to electrical engineering.
Okay. How old were you when you got out of the military?
40, let me see, I got to start counting now. 43, 21, 44, 22, 45. I was 24 years old.
24 years old. So you went through 4 years of
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
I was 20, I'm not be 23 if I came out in 46. Yeah. Figured out something.
What's the difference between the commercial license, pilot license, and the private license?
Private license, I can only fly myself.
But a pilot license is a pilot license when you say.
Oh no, yeah, it's a pilot license, but a commercial pilot, I mean, I can take you up for higher.
Okay. Up higher than the actual.
Oh yeah, I can take you up for higher. Private license, I cannot take you up for higher.
No, for hire,
For
like
hire.
hire, like a taxi cab driver.
Like you
charge.
can, yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes, you can hire him. Okay.
Yes. The only thing I had to do is make sure that every 6 months I had taken a physical to make sure that I was in good condition.
What's the physical consist of?
Huh?
What does the physical consist of?
Eyes, coordination.
So what would you say to a young Afro-American who wants to get his pilot license today?
Get a good education, number one. That's all.
What's involved in a pilot license?
It's just like driving a car almost. The only difference between the two is taking it off the ground and putting it down again. There's not much difference. You just have to have coordination. You got good coordination, you can do it.
Let me tell you something. I flew a plane once. About, God, it might have been about 4 or 5 years ago. And Paulie was in the back of the plane. One little Cessna's leaving Executive Airport. I didn't like it. I always wanted to fly a plane. I didn't like it. You guys sit there with your foot and try to make the plane. Look, the plane's going like this. I'm going down the runway. I'm like, whoa. Oh, how come you can't steer like a car? And then when it's time to go, pull the hell. The guy looked at me and says, that ain't the way it's supposed to be. I said, well, guess what? I'm sitting in the back of the plane from here on out. You fly, and I'm sitting.
It's just coordination. I mean, you just.
I just couldn't get it. It just, that plane being so small. And then
Have you ever drove a stick shift car?
Yes, that's what I learned. But '64 Volkswagen.
All right then. I mean, it was almost similar to that. You had to clutch it, didn't you? You coordinated that, didn't you?
Right.
So why couldn't you do the plane?
Well, there you go.
That's why I'm a DJ, and I let everybody else let the pros fly the plane.
I want to.
Daniel, who wrote the book that you have that you showed me? Was it one of your?
Let me get it.
Oh, I was.
No, this was Lieutenant Colonel.
Pause it right there.
That's okay. You just chop it. Now you glad that you came?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is something, Pam. Excellent job.
Thank you.
He's
Excellent.
Tuskegee, right down the street from my house.
This is something I said we've got to do it. Because now you're hearing the. I mean, I know what I saw on TV.
The one thing I would say, one reason why we think we had it kind of, if you want to say easy, was kind of because of Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. If Mrs. Roosevelt hadn't been in our corner, we still don't know whether or not we'd have made it or not.
So Franklin Delano Roosevelt made
His wife.
Yeah, I
His
understand
wife,
that, but I'm
yeah.
saying Franklin Roosevelt, he made that declaration to allow blacks into the
Yes.
military because of his wife.
We think so.
Wow.
She had a hand in it.
Thank you, Mrs. Roosevelt.
Because when she,
Posthumanist.
as you know, the first Negro pilot was Eugene Bullard.
No, I didn't know.
Oh,
This is
he
interesting.
learned how to fly in France, and he flew with the French Air Force during World War I.
Was he a Frenchman?
No, the Negro from America.
Okay.
And the first African-American pilot was Bessie Coleman. Bessie was a woman, and she went to France. She saved up her money in this country, went to France, learned how to fly, came back to this country in 1922. She was a stunt pilot. She died in a plane crash in 1926.
Wow.
And 1926, from that era to Tuskegee experiment, over 100 Negroes knew and could fly airplanes, including men and women.
Now, the Tuskegee experiment, was that what they made that movie with Miss Jane Pittman? Not Jane Pittman, but the movie.
Fishburne?
Was it the movie about where they experimented on
No,
these men?
that The Tuskegee Airmen, I don't think, I got the movie in there now. A friend of mine gave me the whole thing from 1995. I got it in that now.
Okay.
I was at the prisoners yesterday. I had a 15-minute movie, and then in the full movie, they only started a 15-minute movie because they wanted me to run my mouth for 45 minutes.
Well, Daniel, First Lieutenant Charles Francis, was that one of your comrades?
No, he wasn't one of my comrades. I never met Charles Francis, what's it called, but he was, as far as I know, he was just a writer, which he, Colonel Adolph Casso was in the service. They're both white.
Well, where did they get all the pictures? Because you showed me pictures of you at 20 years old in here.
I guess, don't ask me where he got them from, because let's face it, because last year, one of my daughters, who finally retired and moved down here, after 12 years of trying, was able to get a copy of the letter we sent to the Southwestern Commanding General.
The one that you signed, that you were the first signature?
It took her 12 years to get it. One of my classmates been trying for 25 years. He hasn't gotten one yet. And the reason why, last year she said, after 12 years, when she called up the National Archives trying to get the letter, she told him the reason why she wanted the letter, because her father was the first one to sign it. He didn't want to give it to him as a present on his 90th birthday. My daughter was lucky in that the librarian she talked to was really dedicated. So the librarian, after checking the National Archives, couldn't find it. She went to the Library of Congress. And going through the Library of Congress, I don't know how long it took her. It took almost 2 weeks. She found a copy of the letter on microfilm.
Wow.
Marked confidential. And she told my daughter that she had found a copy of it and that she would send her a copy of the letter that we sent to the General, which I've got in my files right now. And not only did they send her a letter, they sent a picture of me taken 65 years ago. Now, where they got that picture from, I had the slightest idea. They also sent us a copy of the answer that the commanding officer on the base tried to justify our treatment. And much to my surprise, what I found out, that the letter that we sent the Southwestern Commanding General made its way all the way up to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff were not happy at all when they read our letter. And they let the commanding officer of the base know about it.
Wow. How old are you, Daniel?
90.
You're 90 years old. Okay. All right. Now, one quick question for you. You guys went through such a struggle to be able to advance African Americans. How do you feel about America now and what goes on in our young people and no direction and just rap music and all of that? How do you feel? I mean, you guys you struggled mightily to be able to move us forward. Do you feel like we're continuing to move forward, or are we moving backward with our pants hanging off our bottoms?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew
Do you mind if I steer the answer here? Because
she was going to say that.
with our pants hanging off our bottoms and our underwear showing and I think about your struggle and what you
I'm
went
just
through.
disgusted seeing where our young folks live. I blame it on their parents. I don't see why. What puzzles me, now let's see, I got 8 children, 5 girls and 3 boys. Now, I never let my boys had to dress properly at all times.
Amen.
Now, let's see now, who's hanging the pants down now? That means my children must be the ones that's doing it now. Now, why my children is letting their children hang their pants down is a mystery to me. I do not know why. I'm really against it. But I believe that a good education, but then again, see, we have problems. And the problem is a divided family. I mean, you got families with mothers, no fathers. Fathers or no mothers. Now, those happen. All right, let's say you're a single mom and you got 2 or 3 kids.
I am a single mom.
Okay, let's say you got 2 or 3 kids.
We're talking about pants on the ground. Listen to this.
You out working daily. So when you out working daily, the only thing your kids got controlling them is what's in this classroom. Now, when they come from the classroom, when you are working, between, let's say they got out of the classroom around 2 or 3 o'clock. You don't get home till around 4 or 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Now, between that time and that time, what are your kids doing? They're association with kids outside. Now, if they happen to be associating with kids that have no ethics or whatnot, that's the one thing they're going to stop following. And when you come home, you have a hard time controlling your kids. I got a great-granddaughter who's got a 10-year-old kid, and she's having problems with him because she hardly ever see him for the simple reason she's working 8 and 10 hours a day. And he spends more times with his friends outside than he does with her. No man in the family, and that's it. It's hard.
So you would we're both thinking the same, on the same wavelength, because I've said this before on the show. Now, would you say this, Daniel? With the parents divided and one working all these hours and the kids really just running ripshot in the house, shouldn't there be like a little, back in the day when we cut a fool, I know when I cut a fool, my mama beat my behind with a belt.
Mine did too.
Now, wait a minute, hold it now. What if you beat your kids with a belt today?
You get arrested. Which I think is a major, major flaw.
See, that's what's wrong with America
society.
right there.
Very major flaw. Yes.
Yes, I got my behind whipped a couple of times.
And it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt you. I mean, it hurt then, but it did
right.
well. It did you good,
That's
not
right.
bad.
A couple, not too many times, because I could always outrun my parents.
You were a mess when you were a young man. I can tell. I can tell. Okay. Well, this is the book, Tuskegee Airmen. I'm just very, very pleased and honored to meet you and have the opportunity to talk to you. But if you get an opportunity to pick this up, there's pictures of everything that you were telling me about as far as your squad and all of that. So there's pictures of Daniel in here. And I noticed all your medals of honor when we walked in and your photo there. That was just really, really special. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this interview. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Is it anything that I didn't talk to you about that you'd like to discuss or that you want to bring out in this interview?
I don't know. Do you have any other questions you can think of?
I'm good. I've definitely learned a lot about your situation.
One thing I just wanted to stress, as I said before, is that the Negroes were more than just pilots. I want to let everybody know that men, women, and everybody are part of the Tuskegee experiment. Because as I said before, very few people realize that the Tuskegee Airmen were more than just pilots.
That is true. That's all we learned. And I wish that there had been a bigger support factor in the Red Tails, because that story would have been brought out more. But because it was just so lukewarm as far as the response.
But you must realize now, if they'd have added more to it, that means the movie as it was then was over 2 hours long.
No, they were going to do a prequel, so the next one would have been like Star Wars, how they did the 3,
Oh, yeah, I know
and then they did a prequel with 3.
No, because that was John Lucas that did Red Tails.
That's right.
So yeah, he would have done.
He put his own
yeah.
money into it, and
his
he was
own money
yes,
into it.
and he was going to actually shoot another one that was the prequel that would have told the story prior to getting to
Well,
overseas.
I don't know whether he made his money back or not.
No, it was a miserable failure. We just
No.
really was not supporting.
I think he just barely made his money back. He made it overseas versus here stateside.
Okay, got it.
Because he couldn't get
support.
black media to support it, and
He
you
couldn't
know
get
that black
support.
media is not controlled by us anymore on the air. So
Wow.
So,
Well, we're glad to get your story. We're glad to be able to talk to you about
Absolutely.
this. Thank you so much.
right.